You see the kids coming out of med school and you see the people that have been practicing for 15 years, there's a different look in their eye, right? I mean, the kid coming out of med school, they got a sparkle, they got a shine, they got vigor, they're ready to go. But what if you could always have a backup plan?
Welcome to the Real Estate Mogul MD podcast. Thanks for tuning in and taking control of your financial future. This is a show where we not only motivate and inspire, we give you actionable real-world experience to help you live life by design. You'll hear journeys and stories from other physicians, investors, coaches, consultants, and entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, Brett Riggins. With over 27 years of experience, today's guest has been involved from start to finish on over $425 million in construction projects, ranging from multifamily all the way to industrial. He is the founder and CEO of SRI, a real estate developer and investor. Everybody, please welcome Mr. Shannon Robnett to the show. Hey, Shannon, welcome to the show, man. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Brett. How about yourself?
I'm doing wonderful, trying to stay warm here. And I'm here in the Carolinas. Where are you located at?
I'm in Boise, Idaho, and it's 9 degrees.
9, come on with it. But you're probably used to it then. I mean, right? I mean, I grew up in Michigan, so I get somewhat used to it.
Not really. I mean, we've got about 11 inches of snow in the last 3 days.
Wow.
And we got another storm coming in tonight. So I heard you guys have had some fun over there too, though.
Yeah, it's not too bad. Actually, in the Carolinas, it's not too bad. So we're recording this here in the beginning of the year in 2024, and there's really a storm that's moved through the entire United States, kind of shaking things up, especially in the football season, right. which is entertaining. But more importantly, even in real estate, that kind of shakes things up from residential to commercial all across the gamut, whether you're renovating properties, if you have vacant properties. I mean, this thing could just bring hell upon you if you're not managing your assets properly. You know, these freak freezes that happen are always interesting. So I want to jump right into that, Shannon, and learn a little bit more about your experience, your journey, where you're at now, and what kind of value we could bring to the listeners here today. So Shannon, if you could just give the listeners an idea of who you are and you know what it is that you do.
Yeah. Well, Brett, I was born into a real estate family. You know, if you've read Robert Kiyosaki's Little Purple Book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I grew up with Rich Dad, right? Not the one that looked rich, the one that actually was. And my parents retired at 50 with cash flow from building real estate. My mother was a third generation real estate broker. My father was a builder and a developer. And I spent all my free time working as an indentured servant on the construction sites and, you know, keeping our house, quote unquote, realtor perfect, because you never knew when my parents were going to sell the house and we'd be homeless. But that was my growing up. And I didn't really appreciate it at the time. But as I got into my late teens and my early 20s, and I began to experience life, I began to see where trading time for money wasn't going to get me anywhere. And I started my first business in 1996. 96 when my son was born. And I began to build residential houses. I then realized I didn't like homeowners. And so I gravitated toward the commercial field, done everything from police stations to city halls, medical facilities, gymnasiums, schools, fire stations, and every time I did that, industrial complexes, whatever I did, I saw that when I was done building it, I was done making money from that person, right? So at the end of the day, I was not creating an income stream. I was trading my time for dollars, even though at a higher level as a business owner. And I began to see where the people that I was building for were the ones that were actually building the long-term wealth. They were building an income stream that would function whether or not they showed up to work today or not. And I watched my parents that same year in 2001 retire and choose the life they wanted, not based on how they had to go earn their money. And so I pulled all my resources together. I cobbled everything I had, and I built an industrial complex where 2 of the original tenants are still in the buildings today. And that's been 22 2 years. Those buildings are paid off. They've created a cash flow stream, and that was really kind of the evolution for me for the next step to go from a for hire general contractor more to a developer. I started working with single check writers. A guy, I have actually quite a few physicians that I've worked with over the years that they would come in, they would write the check for $1 million, whatever the equity need was. We'd do the project, we'd make some money, and we'd go do it again. And then in 2017, I did a deal with a family office group. It was a 180 unit apartment complex, all ground up development. And that family office wrote a $19 million check. And I realized at that point where I was going, very few people in a single check writer position could follow me. And so I began the journey of syndicating capital and figuring that out. But with 25 years of experience building, that part wasn't a problem. Managing, turning around, renovating, all of that stuff was very, very well inside my wheelhouse. And over the last 3.5 years, we've syndicated about 60 million in capital. We returned about 32 million to our investors. We currently have new and value add projects going anywhere from Washington to Florida. And we've kind of really helped people focus on how to get out of the tax game, because people don't realize that the single largest expense in their life is not their children. It's not their wife or their husband's spending habits. It is the tax man. And so we've helped people understand how they can mitigate their taxes, reduce their tax burden, allowing them to invest more to get closer and faster approach of that end game that puts you into the passive income stream.
Very, very interesting. I love that path too of starting not necessarily at the bottom, but starting in the actual hands-on labor piece of that. It sounds like in the construction world, and then building.
Well, I'm glad you loved it. It didn't feel awesome.
Come on, man. I that's my path. That's my path as well too. Mine is residential though, and not quite to that scale, but that's it. And I completely understand. And my family is still there. My older brother is a concrete guy, and that is just the thought of that is just dreadful.
Yeah.
So I can I can appreciate that. But I love that path because you picked up. I say this often. We all have our own journeys, and these experiences we stack along that way build these verticals, and those verticals create different opportunities.
Correct.
And the stack that you've created and the opportunities you've created along the way are awesome. I love that path. I want to talk a little bit more about what you mean by finding these ways to generate that tax-free passive income. And if we just took that from like a beginner's perspective, what does that mean? Because we're talking about passive income, right? And I know there's a line. I'm not a CPA. I don't know if that's obvious or not. I'm not a CPA, but there's passive income and there's active income, and those the way that we depreciate or write these losses off affects which bucket we can put those losses into. So let's talk a little bit from the beginning piece of what does that mean when you say you're generating tax-free passive income or helping others do that?
Well, let's just start real quick with what is active and what is passive, right? So I am active in the real estate game, right? My daily activities are about creating income, about creating opportunities, building buildings, active ownership, active management. And people can do that. According to the IRS, there's a couple of tests. The biggest one is that you have to spend about 750 hours annually, not about, but more than 750 hours annually. And so about 70 hours each month, you need to be involved in the activities of real estate, you directly. By doing that, that allows you to use depreciation and other things available for tax benefit in real estate against your active income. So if my construction company makes $1 million this year and I go out and buy a $3 million apartment complex and I depreciate 60% of that through bonus depreciation, I'm able to wipe out all of my active income, right? That's because I'm a real estate professional. If your listeners who are typically engaged in other things, being a doctor, being lawyer, whatever it is, their activity is not in real estate. So they're able to use those losses against passive income because they are passive in that activity. It's not their primary focus, which means that they can take that same depreciation and use it against the passive income that comes in. So they bought that same apartment complex for $3 million. There's $1.5 million in depreciation that they can take. They have to take it against the rents that are coming in, not against their primary income as a doctor or a lawyer or things like that. And so there's different ways that you can look at that. And when you're setting yourself up to come to a place where tax is not what drives you, i.e., the average person in America is paying 50% of their income to taxes of various kinds. If you live in California or New York, it's up to 63% of your income goes to taxation. If you're able to put yourself out of the driver's seat on your income and get your income passively, whether that's through dividends, whether that's through the way that you've structured your companies to pay you real estate itself, then you're able to use those passive losses to offset that, then getting you past that. So if you were to have $100,000 in passive income and a $200,000 depreciation credit, you would be able to offset that 100 grand and receive it tax free, thereby giving yourself about a 50% raise because you're not in a tax situation on that, which most of us would then use to reinvest in more real estate, creating more passive income, creating more need for taxation and depreciation until you've grown that to a place where it comes quickly and rapidly and allows you to walk away from your full-time employment or whatever company that you're running that brings you your primary source of income, and then everything becomes passive at that point.
So the bucket idea, I love this, and I just kind of picked this out of what you were saying there. I love this idea. There's passive income and active income, and this bucket separation, and the idea of getting all of our income into the passive bucket, so that way we can use the depreciation from these investments, real estate investments, to offset our income. So getting to that passive bucket. But you said something there was very interesting to me, is structuring your businesses and structuring your other income, not changing your income, but potentially structuring your income so that it is passive versus active.
Correct.
So that was a very interesting thing that you said there. I really, really like that. Lots of different ways we could go into this with the tax benefits of it, but the biggest thing is getting to that passive bucket. And the listeners out there, we're talking just before we started recording here that the listeners are going to range from, in med school, just getting started, which is a great time to plant these seeds and start thinking about these buckets and, the little purple book and all of that stuff, all the way into, just selling a practice or, at the end of their practice kind of perspective. So in that push, where do you feel is a great spot to start thinking about this for either potential high income earners or high income earners? What if we just start with a potential high income earner? Where should they start with this bucket race?
Well, and my story is I was working on a job and I got to know the little lady next door, and she was in her late 70s and she had a mentally disabled son, and they lived in an industrial area and they had about 3 acres there. And I got to know my crane operator, and he needed a place to park his cranes. And I wound up putting a deal together and made more money doing that deal than I made working on that job. And I forgot that I'd made that income. I went and spent it, of course. I bought some more real estate, but then here comes 12 months later, here comes Uncle Sam wanting his 30% of the income that I made. And because it was a flip property, it was active income to me. And so it was ordinary income. And at that point, I was 20 years old, and I learned that I needed to find a way that put together a plan at any price and at any cost, because 30% of $100,000 means a lot more to me than 30% of $1 million. Even though the number is bigger, there's $700,000 left to live on versus 70 grand left to live on. So my thought process would be, if you're in med school, you are facing down mountains of debt, right? You've got student loans out the wazoo. You're just coming into your money-making time. You're coming out of med school. You're just now starting to make money. and you are going to set up the habits and the practices for the rest of your life. You're never going to make less money in your life, hopefully, and you're never going to be able to live as cheaply as you do now, right? You just got done with med school. You are really accustomed to the taste of ramen, right? I mean, you are all about eating and living as inexpensively as possible. And if you start to practice this and save 30% of 100 grand and start to put that back into place because you've been passive in how you activated your income and what kind of deductions you've used and things that you've used for those purposes, you're going to find yourself developing a habit that when you get to that place that you're now making $1 million a year or 600 a year, whatever you're aiming for, and your student debt is all paid off and all of that stuff is taken care of, you're now in a place that your habit is there to save you the most, because it isn't something that just gets implemented. It's not like you just walk in and go, whoa, I've got $1 million tax problem. Let's flip on this switch and let's eliminate it. These are habits and things that you're going to do and structures you're going to set up and how you're going to do your things. I even heard of a doctor and surgeon, husband and wife, that actually he, as the general practitioner, lessened the amount of time he worked and became a real estate professional so that they could take active real estate losses in depreciation against their active income, which was quite high. Now, one would think, well, wait a minute, why would you want to be less doctor and more real estate professional unless you could look at the leverage power of debt and equity in real estate to offset active income and then save that money, then reinvest that money and continue to have that problem. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of opportunity, but I would say the sooner the better.
So that particular instance too, I just want to throw out the why has to align in that too, of wanting to step away. And we talk about this a lot. The why has to align with you as a person to want to step away from medicine, or doing something that allows you to practice medicine on your own terms and be more align more with the passion that you do have for medicine, not because you have to go to work, not because you have to practice medicine, but this is the kind of fuel behind the engine to allow you to focus more on your passion in medicine.
Well, and I think what happens, I've seen it a lot, right? Because I deal with quite a few physicians that are on 45 plus, right? They're really solidly in their money-making years. And all of the reasons why they wanted to go with medicine and go into medicine are long gone. Mm-hmm. The long hours have added up. The continuing changing HIPAA regulations and everything that goes into it has beat the passion right out of them, mm-hmm. And they're sitting here going, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. It's lucrative, but if I could do anything other than this, I would. Mm-hmm. And yet I'm here. I'm in this money-making machine that generates quite a bit of income. I can't really go do anything else because of the money that I'm making. But I don't love it anymore. And that's where this passive income thing allows you to get back to a place where maybe what you're wanting to do is do this in a third world country, do this with a nonprofit, do this for a certain group of people that need your specialty and need your service, can't necessarily afford it. And this allows you to walk away from that. It allows you to spend time with your kids. It allows you to spend time with your family. And a lot of the times we do things based on one set of thought processes that 10, 15, 20 years later, we realize life is very different than we had imagined. And so passive income is awesome for that.
It makes me laugh. Every time I think of this scenario similar to this, there's an old story of, I don't know the exact story, Shannon, but the grandmother cooking the ham for, it's probably came from a book or something. The grandmother's cooking the ham for Christmas, mm-hmm. and she pops it in there. She cuts off the end of it. She gets it down in the pan. She teaches her daughter how to do that. So the mm-hmm. grandmother teaches the mother how to do that. Then the mother, third generation, goes to teach her daughter this, and the daughter's like, "Hey, mom, why are you cutting the end off the ham?" And she's like, "I don't know. That's just the way that your grandmother told me." And they finally get back to ask the grandmother, "Why do you cut the end off the ham?" She says, "Because it won't fit in the pan."
Right.
So you get through these things, you just get set up going in these motions over and over and over again. And, just being able to plant that seed early, I think, is a big takeaway, and understand that there are paths and structures that you can set up on the way on your journey that helps
Yeah.
you become more fruitful when you get there?
Well, and a lot of us find ourselves in a position where, we started out in life with these idealistic goals. You see the kids coming out of med school and you see the people that have been practicing for 15 years. There's a different look in their eye, right? I mean, the kid coming out of med school, they got a sparkle, they got a shine, they got vigor, they're ready to go. But what if you could always have a backup plan? What
Mhm.
if you could always have something? I mean, we talk about the job taking it out of you, but where is your ability to compensate should an emergency happen? Should your parents need you full time, or should your spouse need you full time, or you have a child that has needs that would require you to do something different? If we're built the way that a lot of us built our income stream, there's only a single source for that. The funny thing is, it says that the average millionaire has 7 streams of income, right? So
Yeah.
if one dries up or slows down or whatever, they're not changing their lifestyle because they're balanced. They have other output, they have other options. They also have they have the leverage of using other people's outputs and efforts to make the money.
Leverage, massive. And that leverage is not just in capital, it's other resources, other relationships. There's so much to that leverage piece. I speak with a lot of physicians, Shannon, and a lot of the times, we'll have a conversation whether they're just getting started in real estate or not, but the idea of leverage comes up. When is the right time to borrow? Should I borrow? There's always the Dave Ramsey kind of idea when we're talking about borrowing money. But is there, so say I've got a listener, we've got, say, $25,000. And I wouldn't say that this is cash that I want to lose, but it wouldn't ruin my life if I lost this $25,000. This is my
Right.
cash savings for this.
Right.
Is that the right time to invest? And then what type of debt would be comfortable that I could lock into for this 25,000 in liquid?
Well, I would challenge all of your listeners to show me anyone that had saved their way to millionaire status. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're putting it in the bank account and maybe you're really liking life right now because you're getting a 5% return on a CD, right? And that's as high as it's ever been in a long time, right?
There's no
But
stackable returns on that CD though.
what exactly?
Yeah.
But if you take that and let's just run the scenario of whether that this is a single family home that you go and buy or a syndication, which is more my world, and syndication is just a fancy word for partnership, right? And so you're going to join me in a 200 unit apartment complex that we're going to build. We're going to renovate, however the business plan is. That typical return on something like that on a 5-year profile is going to be a 1.8 to a 2x. So in a 5-year time span, your $25,000 is going to become 1.8 to 2 times that. So you're going to walk out the deal 5 years later having doubled your money. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very typical real estate deal that's fairly easy to find. Lots of sponsors out there with lots of track record, which is really important, that can get those kind of returns for you in a tax efficient way. You can do the same thing with real estate. If you want to go buy a single family home, you're putting 20% down. You're getting a loan for about 90 grand. You're in a $120,000 asset. You're going to get about a 6% cash on cash return. Your overall at the end of the day should be in that 5 to 7 year range to double your money, right? The question becomes, do you want to deal with finding the property, buying the property, closing on the property, getting the loan on the property, getting the property manager on the property, dealing with all the things that go along with that? Or do you want to partner with someone who that is their goal, that is their job, and is what they do on a professional level? Very similar to how doctors recommend to specialists. This is kind of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So based on that same ability, you have the opportunity to take advantage of all of these things and advance your 25,000. So if you're able to save 25,000 in 2 years, you put that into a real estate deal, it doubles itself in 5 years. In the meantime, you've got yourself into 2 more deals. Now you're sitting there and you do have stackable returns that in a very short period of time of 5 years, you've taken a savings of 25, added another 25 to it, or 50 to it, and you've doubled that through that time period. So now you're looking at a path forward that now, because a lot of people say they want to make their first investment and they want cash flow. Well, if you've got $100,000 to invest and the average real estate deal is returning 6% every single year, can you really live on 100 grand? Well, no, you can't. That's $6,000 a year. You've got to find ways to take that 100,000 and make it 3 million. And so these stackable returns of being involved in whether it's syndications or single family or small multifamily, whatever your flavor is, and being able to build that out to where you now have a $3, $5, $10 million real estate portfolio that the passive returns at 6% are something you can live on.
So the cash flow mitigates risk in a way that makes the investment sustainable. But
Yes.
the equity multiples are what are those bubbles, those big events that are the game changer, really. Because even in syndication, you've got those equity multiples. And in single family too, if you're doing this too, Shannon, you can do a refi and capture that equity in turn and still hold the property too.
Correct.
Potentially.
And let's think about this. I mean, if you buy $25,000 worth of stock, there's no leverage, right?
Right.
But if you have that same, and we're going to say it's $20,000 because I want easy math, right? And we put that 20% down, we're able to get the bank to partner with us at a fixed rate. And you should never be buying something that requires you to feed it monthly. You should be able to have it sustain itself and make a couple of bucks. Usually, you should be able to cover all of your expenses and make about 12% toward that, which you're using for reserves and for capital preservation and things like that. But at the end of the day, you've got somebody else paying down on that loan. You've leveraged that, and now you're going to take a 3% gain on a $100,000 asset for 5 years. So you are now going to put yourself in a position where you've made $15,000 in appreciation on the asset plus the 6% cash flow, which means that the combine of those two, you're looking at close to 18 to 22% return, which is a very viable return. And you've done it in real estate, which allows you multiple options on how you can not pay taxes on it. You mentioned refinance. If your property goes up $25,000 and you refinance and you pull that out, the IRS does not say that's taxable income to you.
Beautiful.
It's beautiful. Now, when you sell that, you bought the property for 100, you sell it for 200, you can now do a 1031, which means that you can invest in another property for $200,001. You have to spend $1 more than you sold for, and you can defer those taxes. So now you're in a position where now you've been able to, maybe you go in and you buy 2 properties with $50,000 down on your gain. You now have a $300,000 real estate portfolio, and you've done it without paying taxes on that $100,000 you've made. $300,000 real estate portfolio is now returning a 6% return, cash on cash. You're now getting closer and closer to that place where your passive income is going to replace your active income, especially when you're not paying taxes on it.
It's interesting too, and it's a mindset, a perspective piece. When you look at this, it's not. I mean, when you start, I think a great entry is single family. That's where I've cut my teeth and understood from the sweat equity piece, trial by fire, picking up and but learning that when you first look at these deals, and even on syndication, the return is relatively minimal, right? That's not what's going to retire you. It's the stack. It's the stack and those equity multiples on the turn, the tax benefits, how you twist that so it works for your advantage. That's the difference maker. The one thing we haven't talked about, Shannon, is the relationships that we build along the way. What does it mean to you to invest in yourself and to build a mastermind around you doing this?
Well, the thing is, you're going to become the sum of your 5 closest associates, right? And you watch people that are continually elevating their game. They're continually elevating the people that they spend time with, and they're continually elevating their lifestyle, right? And when you look at the easiest thing to have control over is yourself. The easiest thing to improve is yourself, but it's the hardest to get done because it actually requires you to truly go to work, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of people like the idea of buying a single family and fixing it up, or getting a partner and fixing them up, when the reality is, when you're working on yourself and you're putting the time and effort into yourself, you're going to see those gains are going to be substantial. And one of the things that I've seen in my life is when I'm having struggles in business, it's usually, if I look in the mirror, it's struggles internally, right? I've lost my focus, or I'm not at my peak performance. I've got something in my life that's distracting me, that's agitating me, that's keeping me from being 100% in what I need to do, and it's rippling outward. And the thing that I figured out is the most expensive thing to ignore is myself. You know, I spoke at a seminar a couple months back, and my topic was, in order to be selfless, you first have to be selfish.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're not taking yourself seriously, and if you're not improving yourself, and if you're not going the distance to build up your knowledge, your information, your tolerance, your negotiating, all the different things that come into play, if you're not building yourself into a better person, there's going to come a point when you've reached a ceiling of all the farther you can go. And a lot of people don't realize that, because they keep making bets out beyond what they're capable of. And that's where people really tend to get into trouble, is because they see this trajectory of growth, and man, they're working on themselves and their things are improving, and then pretty soon they stop because they think they've got it figured out. They stop that self-improvement, but they keep making those bets, and they wind up out over their skis, and then things start to go very poorly, right?
Interesting.
And
So,
so working on yourself is one of the best investments you could ever make.
and if we step, kind of lean on the old Jim Rohn here, we can step on the books that we read to raise the ceiling, that we
Absolutely.
see. So
Absolutely.
those are huge. If you could suggest one book, uh, I'm going to give you a kind of, maybe just a direction of where a listener, maybe say we're in the 200 to 400 income range. And what's one book that you would suggest that would help them take this to the next level, whether it's to take that and move more towards the passive bucket, or to elevate themselves to help them become who they need to be to live in the passive bucket?
Well, I think obviously everybody, we're going to assume they've read Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. But I think the next one that's really just fundamental is Think and Grow Rich, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's 100 years old, but it is one of the primers. It absolutely is. It's
I
one of
just
the
raised it up. Yeah.
primers of how do you control your direction with your mind,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, you never hear anybody constantly complaining about woe is me, and you never see people that have a constant negative output and outlook make any money. You
Right.
never see them. Now, they may have inherited it, but you never see anybody with that attitude make that money. So it's the power of the mind to think and grow rich, whether that's in your practice, in real estate, in marriage, in relationships with others. All of those things become part of that fabric. And if you're not controlling your mind, you're not going to get where you want to go.
Love it. I love that. I love that book, and I love that suggestion. There's a book also called Psycho Cybernetics, and I'm fascinated at how there's so many of these books align, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not by mistake, right? It's
Right.
not that any of this stuff is created; it's collected and it's shared. And
Right.
opportunities like this, you giving us your time today, Shannon, these are the times that allow us to share that collective, and and help others learn from. I saw one of your social media posts, scar tissue. If we can learn from each other's experiences and help lift each other to who we need to be to become what we want to be, it's such a great path, man. If you could go back 15 years, Shannon, and sit beside somebody who may have been on a similar path as you, maybe similar passions, similar directions, similar goals, what is it that you would say to them now?
You know, I think the thing that a lot of us do is we're timid about what we want. Too many of us stay in the safe mode. We've gone this route because that's what we think we're expected to do. And I would say chase boldly what you're after. The energy and the exuberance I just turned 50 this year, right? So I'm starting to do that, look back a little bit more often, right? But when I look at the energy that I had when I was 25, when I look at the energy that I had at 30, there are so many lessons that I learned through horsepower, through trial and error, through things that today I wouldn't do. But the lessons that I learned have made me who I am. And so I would say to chase boldly what you're after. Chase fervently that dream that you have, because you still have a lot of life ahead of you. 15 years ago, I'm 35. I've got a lot of life ahead of me. I've got a lot of time to correct it if I don't quite get it right. But better that than to not have tried at all.
Absolutely. Reflection is a huge piece. Reflection is so much, man. And looking back, and because if we don't take the time to see where we've been, how are we going to be able to adjust to get to where we're going? It's a beautiful piece. And God willing, at 50 years old, congratulations for making this far. God willing,
Right.
you've got another 50 left in you, my man. Let's go.
I don't know that I'd be happy with another 30,
Yeah.
right? But you're right. Had I known what it took to actually get to 50, right? The
Mhm.
lessons that I've learned, I would have failed. Another favorite book of mine is John Maxwell writes a book, Failing Forward.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
and if I would have known how easy it was to recover from failure, it's the fear of failure that terrifies everybody, but how easy it is to recover and correct from failure, I would have failed faster and failed more often younger.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I love that as well too. Man, Shannon, I appreciate your time. There's so much to dig into. The listeners can follow you all the different platforms, but you've made it super simple, and I love this. It's at Shannon Robnett, right?
Yep.
ShannonRobnett.com, right?
That's right. You can go there. You can see the deals we got going. You can meet my team. You can get to my social media handles. You can check out our newsletter, see job site cameras. There's all different kinds of stuff there, but it's
Oh,
just
that's
right
cool.
there at shannonrobnett.com.
Awesome. And for the listeners today, that's ShannonRobnett.com.
Yep.
Right. And
Yep.
there's the logo. And tell me a little bit about the logo here before we go. I'm just curious. The three circles, what are those?
Well, everything ties together. And you talked about your network earlier. It's all in the networking, right? How I'm getting to where I'm at right now. I got a deal going in Florida from a network connection of a guy I met in Texas at a conference, right? And we've got a connection on the other side for the lending, and everything is interconnected. And you have to have that network. And one of the things that we think is integral to that is your personal growth and your personal understanding of finances. So if you don't have that basis for that, then you're an unintelligent investor. You're making an investment based on something you don't know. But we really want to bring all of that back around and teach you how to be an intelligent investor and how to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, so that all of your choices are connected and you're making the best possible choices to get you to the outcome and the end result that you're really truly looking for.
That's awesome, man. Connection is huge. Connection is huge. My investment company
Absolutely.
is actually called Connect Home Buyers. So
Mm-hmm.
100% agree with you
Yeah.
on that. Shannon, thank you for your time today, man. It's been an absolute blast. Maybe here in the future we'll have you come back and share some more regarding to the update on the projects that you've got, some of the
Awesome.
syndication type stuff. So thanks
Brett,
again, man. Really appreciate it.
Brett, I really appreciate you having me on. I hope your listeners got something out of it.
Awesome. I'm sure they did. And if you're out there today, thank you again for your time and your attention. Please go ahead and check out shannonrobnett.com. Learn a little bit more. We didn't dive into some of the opportunities that are there, but reach out. You've got to expand your associations along with limiting your associations as well too, to make this change in your life. It all starts with a thought. Everybody can think. It's those of us who take action on those thoughts that create our own reality. And in doing so, we always want to take a minute and reflect to learn where we've been, to then refocus on where we want to go, and ultimately learn who it is that we need to become to get there. Today, we suggested a couple books that you could stand on to help raise your own ceiling. If you've got any comments, requests for us, some books or guests to be on the show, please reach out to us, info@physicianwealthsystems.com. And until next time, this is the Real Estate Mogul MD.